Welcome to the Celtics pod. I'm Erik Vandenbossche. I got lucky recording this podcast because the NBA schedule came out, or at least the opening week schedule and the Christmas Day schedule came out. So I'll be talking about that. The preseason schedule came out at least a couple of days ago, and I had planned on talking about the preseason schedule, and that was going to kind of lead into a conversation about possible Christmas Day matchups for the Celtics. So this works out well. So instead of that possible list, I'll give you the real list. And that possible list that I was going to do certainly included the Washington Wizards, and that's who the Celtics will play on Christmas Day. Celtics and Wizards. I did want to say just really quickly before I forget, I think the NBA did a pretty good job with these matchups here because there are some good ones. You know, there are some good matchups, some great individual players matching up. Also, we'll get to that opening week schedule, some good matchups there as well. But Celtics and Wizards, that game is going to be at 5:30. Going to be the Celtics' first Christmas home game since 1964. So good matchup, obviously. They played a tough 7-game series during the playoffs. Those two teams don't like each other. That's probably an understatement. You had them, dressing in black before the games, with those funeral matchups, funeral games, whatever you wanted to call them. So now on Christmas Day, they can all dress up like Santa Claus. So we can see John Wall, Bradley Beal dressed up as Santa, or even better, Isaiah Thomas, 5'9" Santa Claus. Kelly Oubre, of course, you had his incident where he was knocked to the ground on a screen. He kind of ran face first into Kelly Olynyk's shoulder or arm or whatever, and then Olynyk in the corner. You already know what happened. He runs up on Olynyk and it just smashes him to the ground, which was completely ridiculous. But also Brandon Jennings, his antics versus Terry Rozier. Not really sure what that was about. I don't know why anybody would go out of their way to target Terry Rozier. I don't know if he trash talks a lot while he's on the floor. I've never really heard him talk a lot, period, so it just kind of seemed weird to go after him. Don't have to worry about that, though, because he's playing in China next season. And then you have the Morris brothers, Markieff Morris, Marcus Morris, those two matching up on Christmas Day, so that's another kind of cool storyline there. But the other Christmas Day matchups, you got the 76ers and you got the Knicks. Not that I'm really excited about seeing those two teams play each other, but it will be cool to see Markelle Fultz and the other young players for Philly. Also on the Knicks side, Kristaps Porzingis is always fun to watch play. And then Melo, he may or may not be there. We don't know. Obviously, he wants out of New York. If he gets what he wants, he won't be playing for the Knicks on Christmas Day. If he gets what he wants, he will be playing for the Rockets on Christmas Day because the Rockets are playing the Thunder. Another good matchup, you got Russell Westbrook, Paul George playing together, so that'll be an opportunity to see those two play together. Also, Chris Paul and James Harden matching up in the offseason, so we can see them play together. Cavs and Warriors, obvious storylines there with a rematch of the NBA Finals. The question is, though, what will the Cavs look like? Because Kyrie Irving, another person who has requested a trade. And if the Cavs get what they want, they said that they wanted a veteran starter, a good young player on a rookie deal, and a first-round pick. If they get what they want, then, maybe the Cavs don't take a major step back during the offseason, and that matchup on Christmas Day is a good one. A example of what they want, and there have been people who said this, and people who also say there's no way this would happen, but they would take Eric Bledsoe, Josh Jackson, and a first-round pick for Kyrie Irving. So if they were able to get, Josh Jackson and Eric Bledsoe, then the Cavs would still be a very good team. So that could be a good matchup on Christmas Day. But if they're going to play the Warriors and they don't get what they want for Kyrie and they end up getting picks and just kind of going into rebuild mode, then the Cavs could get their butts kicked on Christmas. Another matchup, which is actually the final matchup of the day, Wolves and Lakers, another game that I'm not necessarily excited about seeing, but, to see Jimmy Butler, Karl Anthony Towns, Andrew Wiggins, Jeff Teague, see Lonzo Ball as well. A lot of great individual players there, and I would be interested in watching all of those guys play whenever I can. So, like I said, the opening week schedule was also released. Celtics going to kick off the season versus the Cleveland Cavaliers. Another exciting matchup. That's going to be October 17th, which is a Tuesday night. Again, we don't know what Cleveland is going to look like. If Cleveland's big three is there and everyone's healthy and all those things, taking on the Celtics and their big three, and all of the other new additions. Could be a great game. And also, if everyone's there, if all these players are returning to their team, this will give us an opportunity to, an early look at what that rivalry will look like, and, a look at a possible playoff matchup versus those two teams. But I also want to see some of the individual matchups too, like Aaron Baines on Tristan Thompson. Baines was brought in to be the Celtics' best rebounder. He will be. He'll match up versus Tristan Thompson during the season. And then last year, the Celtics and Cavs, when they played each other, the Celtics just got dominated on the glass. So it'll be important, that matchup, and hopefully we see on opening night, we see Aaron Baines match up well versus Tristan Thompson, and we kind of see that gap close in the rebounding department. I mean, outside of Aaron Baines, the Celtics also added a lot of size and length and athleticism with their wings. Those guys should help contribute with the rebounding also. So I think they'll be a better rebounding team, not tops in the league, but certainly not in like the bottom 5 of the league like they were last year. And then another matchup I want to see would be Marcus Morris versus LeBron. So Marcus Morris has had success in the past, or I guess as much success as you can have guarding LeBron James. He has done it well in the past. So hopefully that continues as a member of the Celtics, and it looks like we'll get a chance to see what that looks like on opening night. All right, so a couple of days before they released those two schedules, they also released the preseason schedule. They're scaling it back, trying to reduce the number of back-to-backs. So fewer preseason games, move the regular season up a couple of days, and then reduce back-to-backs, which I think everybody will appreciate. Especially players, their coaches don't want these guys to be completely gassed going into the playoffs. So when you have these back-to-backs late in the season, coaches rest star players. And it's incredibly frustrating if you spend a lot of money to go to a game to see a specific player, and that player is not there. LeBron in his first go-around with Cleveland, I remember I went to TD Garden a couple of times to go see that matchup and to specifically see LeBron James. And a couple of times that I went to TD Garden to see them take on the Cavs, he was resting, and that was completely disappointing. So, if a team's playing on the second night of a back-to-back versus a team that had the night off the night before, that's supposed to be an advantage for the team who had the night off. It doesn't always work out that way, but it makes a lot of sense. So as far as the preseason schedule goes for the Celtics, they're going to play 4 games, 2 versus Charlotte, 2 versus Philadelphia. First preseason game for the Celtics is going to be October 2nd at TD Garden versus the Hornets. All 4 games will be broadcast on Comcast Sportsnet New England, which is good news for folks like me who watch most of the games from home on TV. And I also have a DVR, which is pretty sweet. Works out well for me. I usually have to work every night till 7 o'clock. Now, more on Kyrie Irving, because, these Kyrie Irving trade rumors now include the Boston Celtics. Former Cavs GM David Griffin on ESPN's The Jump said the Celtics were on Kyrie's list of possible trade destinations. Griffin said Kyrie's list included really good coaching situations: Brad Stevens and Popovich. He went on to say the teams on his list: Gordon Hayward in Boston, Kawhi Leonard in San Antonio. He would be accompanied by other great players. So this is new. This list of possible teams already came out. It did not include the Celtics. So we already knew about the Timberwolves, the Heat, the Knicks, and the Spurs. Celtics now saying that they are monitoring the situation. That is according to ESPN's Zach Lowe. So naturally, this brings up the debate, and I think people were already talking about this, but now we really have reason to talk about it. Would you give up Isaiah Thomas for Kyrie Irving, or what would you give up for Kyrie Irving? And you would naturally start with Isaiah Thomas. That's where people seem to be starting. I don't know if that makes a ton of sense. I mean, sending Isaiah Thomas to a rival doesn't make a ton of sense, because the Cavs aren't just a rival. The Cavs are the next step in the Celtics rebuilding process. Getting over that hump, which is Cleveland, that's the next step. And why would you be sending a guy to Cleveland who scores 29 points per game? He shot the ball extremely efficiently, and I don't even know if Isaiah is on Cleveland's target list because he has an expiring contract. They don't know if he's going to re-sign in Cleveland. My guess is he probably won't. I mean, the trend throughout the league now is for these stars to sign with other good teams and try and go deep into the playoffs. You know, people want to challenge Golden State, but I mean, at the very least, have a good team with some other stars on it and go deep into the playoffs. So Isaiah, that might be one thing he would consider if he entered free agency, and he entered free agency not having previously come off a season with the Boston Celtics. One thing we do know for sure is that Isaiah Thomas is expecting someone to roll out the Brinks truck. He has made that abundantly clear. He has said that plenty of times. In his defense, though, in an interview, he said, "I talk about it when people bring it up," and people bring it up. So another thing with Kyrie Irving coming to the Celtics, somebody that the Cavs may want would be Jay Crowder. Everybody wants a piece of Jay Crowder. It makes a lot of sense because he's got that nice contract, especially if you're Cleveland and you are going to rebuild. It would be nice to have Jay Crowder and that contract and get that cap flexibility and somebody you can put in your starting lineup. Shot the ball really well last season. Didn't really translate to the playoffs, but he shot a career high last year during the regular season. Also offers some versatility, can play the 3 and the 4. So getting back to what Cleveland said they wanted, which was the veteran starter, young player with a rookie deal, and a first rounder. As far as picks go, obviously the Celtics have a ton of those that they could trade away. Nets pick, that's probably off limits. They've seemed really reluctant to give up those Nets picks. They have the Lakers-Kings pick, and then maybe something that could be a little bit more practical. They also have, in the next couple of years, they own a Grizzlies first-round pick, a Clippers first-rounder, and then they have their own first-rounders as well. So plenty of options there if the Celtics were to give up a draft pick. And then the young player in a rookie deal, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum. This is all adding up. I'm kind of making the argument against this trade. I mean, all these different assets are adding up because what you're doing is you're giving up assets just to simply swap Isaiah for Kyrie. See, Isaiah Thomas, I mean, he's an established Celtic. He's been here for a little more than 2 seasons. He's beloved in Boston. He's a face of the franchise. He made it to the playoffs the last few seasons. The reason why they went as deep as they did, especially last year. But these two players, swapping them, I don't know how much you gain out of it. Kyrie Irving, everyone kind of looks at him as the better player because he's like 6'2" compared to Isaiah's 5'9", but it's not like either one of these guys are great defenders. You know, Kyrie's not a very good defender either. You know, and Isaiah, despite his issues on defense, like I said, Isaiah is the reason why the Celtics went as far as they did in the playoffs last year. He's what makes the team go. You know, he scored freaking 29 points per game last year, was in the MVP conversation for much of the season, All-NBA second team. And the Celtics were one of the top scoring teams in the NBA in each of the last 2 seasons, and there's a reason for that. It's called Isaiah Thomas. When he's not on the floor, much of the time the offense goes stale. I just don't see why the Celtics would give up all of those assets just to maybe possibly see a minor upgrade at the point guard position. And then, you know, I did say something about Isaiah going to Cleveland, which doesn't make sense for Boston. Kyrie going to the Celtics. I mean, does that make any sense for Cleveland? And if the trade was something more reasonable, let's say it was Isaiah, Jay Crowder, and a first-round pick, I bet some Celtics fans would be okay with that. But if you're Cleveland and you do that deal and Isaiah Thomas doesn't re-sign, then that leaves you with what? Jay Crowder and a first-round pick that used to belong to, like, the Clippers or something? And even if they could get Isaiah Thomas to re-sign, that leaves them with, if LeBron doesn't come back, that leaves them with Isaiah Thomas, Kevin Love, you know, and some other decent players. I mean, how good is that team? Kevin Love and Isaiah Thomas, you could still win games with that, you know, being your top duo. But how far does that get you in the playoffs? Not very far. I mean, if that was the team, then they probably wouldn't even be as good as Toronto or Washington. I wanted to talk about Celtics roster turnover because I believe it is the end of an era. You know, people have mentioned the end of the Avery Bradley era, and that's true. 7 seasons with the Boston Celtics, that's over. A lot of people, including myself, you know, sad to see him go. I'm not talking about that, though. I'm talking about the end of the first chapter of Brad Stevens' coaching career. I say that because the first 4 years were all about rebuilding. They were terrible under Brad Stevens that first season. And there was a lot of guys that were coming in and out. It was like, a revolving door of players who would get traded to Boston and then be gone very soon after. And I think that right now this is a different kind of Celtics team, because those first 4 seasons, like, that was the gritty basketball team that everybody fell in love with because they played defense. They hustled a ton. They would always dive on the floor for loose balls. People loved their passion. People loved the fact that the team would always just really play beyond their abilities and continue to somehow find ways to win basketball games because they play with a lot of passion and a lot of grittiness. So I think you're going from, that type of team to a more skilled, more physical basketball team. And I think this is a big boy basketball team now. In the past, it's been like, the Celtics, it's like we get to the playoffs, but we're really just happy to be here. And our fans are going to stand up and they're going to applaud for us after we get knocked out of the playoffs, because they didn't expect us to do anything in the playoffs anyway. They're just grateful that we played our butts off and at least we got to this point. Those days are over. This basketball team is expected to win games now. They have another legit star with Gordon Hayward. Guy scored more than 20 points per game last season. He can create his own shot. He's extremely versatile. He's got good size and length. Somebody you can pair with Isaiah, and Isaiah hasn't had that, teammate who can also create his own shot. They haven't had that dynamic offensive duo before. So their scoring is going to go to another level. You also got Jason Tatum, who can create his own shot. And at the very least, his rookie season, he'll come in off the bench and be a decent little spark offensively off the bench. And it's not just the skill, but it's also the physicality, becoming a more physical basketball team, adding someone like Marcus Morris, adding Aaron Baines. The Celtics, they've got some tough physical guys now. You got those two that I just mentioned. They joined Marcus Smart. They joined Jay Crowder. So this is, this team is expected to win. I expect them to be better than last season. And I expect them to perform better in the playoffs. I mean, they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals last season, which is great, but obviously they struggled in those first 2 games versus Chicago. And, I talked in a recent podcast about how it was unfair to say that the Celtics would have lost that series if Rajon Rondo hadn't gotten hurt, because the Celtics were in a tough spot at the time. Isaiah's sister had just died. People didn't really know how to react with one another in the locker room. And then as time went on, they loosened up a little bit and they became themselves and all that stuff like that. Yeah, it's probably not fair to assume that the Celtics would have lost that series, but it was likely. It was very likely. So last year in the playoffs, it was tough. The 0-2 start versus Chicago, a tough 7-game series versus Washington, getting completely trounced by Washington at times, not being able to go on the road and get a win there versus the Wizards. So, I mean, I'm expecting more from them in the playoffs. And then versus Cleveland, like I said, that next step in the rebuilding process, that next hurdle is the Cleveland Cavaliers taking the next step forward, because they've taken a step forward every year under Brad Stevens. Following that first season, every year they've won a few more regular season games. They've won a few more playoff games. They sent a guy to the All-Star game 2 seasons in a row with Isaiah Thomas. So that next step is to, if not beat Cleveland in the Eastern Conference Finals or, wherever they match up in the playoffs, if they don't beat them, at the very least really challenge them and really make it a competitive series. Not a 5-game series, but a real competitive one. Make Cleveland sweat a little bit. Play them tough. So I just think the Celtics are now a better basketball team. And the team that we've rooted for the last couple of seasons, I think the team's different now. They have so many new players, and I think they're going to be a better basketball team. And those first couple of years were about rebuilding. Yeah, again, if you wanted to say they were still rebuilding because they're not a true championship contender, fine, say it. But, it seems to me like they're on their way there. And who knows, would they be a true title contender if the friggin' Golden State Warriors weren't so good? I mean, maybe that would be the case. If Cleveland was the team that everybody tried to beat, the Celtics wouldn't be that far behind. I mean, if they all go into If Kyrie Irving goes into the season with the Cavaliers, and they were the best team in the NBA, Celtics would still be the underdog, but they wouldn't be far behind. So the roster turnover and the guys who have left, it was a fun time to be a Celtics fan, and I'll miss some of these guys, Avery Bradley, 4 seasons with Brad Stevens. He had been with the team for 7 years, but spent 4 with Stevens. You had Kelly Olynyk. All 4 of his years with the Celtics were with Stevens. Tyler Zeller, 3 seasons, 3 with Stevens. Amir Johnson spent 2 seasons with Brad Stevens. Jonas Jerebko, a little more than 2 seasons. So all these guys, starting with Avery Bradley, traded to Detroit to create cap space. It was another great season for Avery Bradley. He had his highest field goal percentage since 2011, 2012. And back then, he was a younger player, and he was playing like 15, 20 minutes a game or whatever it was. And he was taking half as many shots. Shot at least 39% from three-point range last season. That's the 3rd time that he's done that in his career. He had the career high 16 points per game. And I love Avery Bradley for a number of reasons, because he's a great guy, because he's a nice person. He was there for Isaiah when Isaiah's sister died. Kind of a quiet dude, goes about his business. Improves a little bit every single year, works really hard, really dedicated defensively, really good two-way player, one of the elite perimeter defenders, at times to shut down some elite level players. He's really frustrated Kyrie in the past. Same thing with Jimmy Butler. But, it's almost like once he leaves, now all of a sudden people are talking about Avery Bradley as if, he was an elite player, which he was not. He was an elite defender, but offensively, he was so limited offensively. His scoring average has been so steady over recent years. I just kind of wonder if that's plateaued, because I don't think he's going to get significantly better offensively. He is not a great ball handler. He doesn't create his own shot like Gordon Hayward does, who was brought into Boston, and that's why Avery Bradley left a year early. Kelly Olynyk, another one of those early Brad Stevens guys who was gone 4 years, $50 million going to Miami. Good season last year for him, 51% from field goal range, which was the best of his career. But his three-point shooting was down last season, which was disappointing. He was shot 40% from three-point range the year before, down to 35% last year. What I'm going to miss about Kelly the most is not his size and his ability to stretch the floor. It's just going to be how awkward the guy was. His footwork in the paint was just awkward to me. I never fully understood it. He would have the ball near the basket, and it looked like he was stuck in quicksand or something. Jaylen Brown at summer league, when he was talking about Kelly Olynyk going off to Miami and signing his contract, saying Kelly should have got more money, he went on to say, how Kelly is, slow motion. I don't know exactly what Jaylen Brown meant by slow motion. It could be what I was saying, which is a guy who looks like he's stuck in quicksand because he just moves so slow. It's I don't get it. His playoff drama is going to be missed. He's just got such a reputation for, getting into these scrums or whatever you want to call them, in the biggest moments in the playoffs on the biggest stage, like when he dislocated Kevin Love's shoulder when he obviously intentionally was trying to rip his arm off so he could beat him over the head with it. But that he was just grabbing Kevin Love. Guys do that in the NBA. Maybe you grab somebody's jersey or something like that. Maybe you don't have good position for a rebound and there's an opponent in front of you, so you kind of grab them. Maybe the ball bounces to a teammate or something like that. To me, that's what I feel like. That's all he was doing. I don't look at that act as malicious. I look at it as maybe it was more careless or something like that. I think maybe that might be Kelly's thing. He's not out to hurt people. I think he's just maybe careless at times. But this thing about grabbing guys' arms, if you're going to pull on someone's jersey or something like that to try and keep them away from a rebound, at least try and hide it a little bit. He did the same thing versus Robin Lopez versus the Bulls in the playoffs last year, where it was just obvious. Everybody could see it watching on TV at home. He takes 2 arms and like bear hugs Robin Lopez's arm, and it was like just like incredibly obvious. And then people obviously looked at that and they pointed that out, and they're like, here he is again. Look at Kelly Olynyk in Boston. Look at that goon. He's trying to hurt Robin Lopez. He's trying to rip his arm off so he can beat him over the head with it, just like he tried to do with Kevin Love. Well, that's not really what he was doing. And then the Oubre the screen. I don't know how people can turn that around on Kelly Olynyk and make that play about Kelly Olynyk. Like, Kelly Oubre just completely lost his head. Just did something that was completely like inexcusable. To lose your cool like that. Talk about not like composing yourself. To lose your cool like that in the playoffs and then get suspended for the following game. I believe the Celtics got slammed in that game that they lost Kelly Oubre. It's not like it ended up hurting Washington, but you don't do something like that and then get suspended for a playoff game. It's completely like a selfish thing to do. So I don't know how people turned that around and made Kelly the bad guy out of that. It looked like a good screen to me. I mean, maybe when you watch it in slow motion, maybe it looks like Kelly leaned into him a little bit or something like that. It wouldn't be the first guy to do that, but Oubre hits Kelly on the shoulder with his face. That looked like that hurt. He went down pretty hard. But, again, to get up and then just sprint at somebody and give him a cheap shot like that in front of a national TV audience, I don't know what the heck he was thinking there. Another guy who left, who was a part of the early Brad Stevens era, was Jonas Jerebko. Jonas, I think for some of the more diehard Celtics fans, somebody that fans really appreciated. I've always enjoyed watching Jonas Jerebko play for the Celtics. 2 years with Utah now. That's what he signed, a 2-year deal in Utah. So for all you Jazz fans who are disappointed that Gordon Hayward left, hey, at least you got Jonas Jerebko. That ought to make up for it. A tiny, teeny little bit. Just a little bit. He was traded to Boston a while back with Gigi Datome. Do you remember Gigi Datome? Gigi only played like 18 games for the Celtics. They used to shoot the ball really well. That was part of the deal that sent Tayshaun Prince back to Detroit. But Jonas, pretty good size. I mean, the guy's 6'10". He's got a beautiful haircut. 15 minutes per game. His three-point percentage did go down last season. The year before that, he shot about 40%, and that dropped to 35%. So similar to what happened with Kelly Olynyk. And then Amir Johnson, too. Another one of those Brad Stevens guys. Spent 2 years with Brad Stevens and did an admirable job. I always liked Amir Johnson. I think a lot of people, maybe your final impression of Amir or maybe your only impression of him, depending on how much Celtics basketball you watch, was him getting moved to the bench during the playoffs and was him being completely out of the rotation at times during the playoffs. But, overall, he had a pretty good 2-year run with the Celtics. Going to Philadelphia now, 1 year, $11 million. So that's it. And like I said, now we can move on from the Celtics being like this gritty hustle team with a lot of heart to, okay, now we're ready to really go deep into the playoffs. Eastern Conference Finals last year, but it was a difficult road. So I'm expecting them to be just better offensively, better rebounding team, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So Celtics podcast, that's it for this episode anyway. I'm Erik Vandenbossche, doing the pod for 92.9 The Ticket, having a lot of fun as always, and I will be back next week to talk about something else. I don't know, maybe the full schedule will come out. I have no idea when that comes out, actually. But if we run out of things to talk about, like news, off-season moves, whatever they are, if we run out of things to talk about, probably will. We can always reminisce about the Celtics and Jonas Jerebko, Kelly Olynyk. Can't get enough Olynyk stories. All right, I'm out of here. Take it easy. Go Seas.